Unmasking the Crackdown, Germany's War on Protest and the Erosion of Civil, the Fracturing Face of Democracy. In a country that often brands itself as a bastion of democracy, human rights, and post-war repentance, a troubling pattern is unfolding. Germany, once the moral compass of Europe's Never Again pledge, now finds itself under international scrutiny for the violent suppression of peaceful demonstrations. From Berlin to Munich, peaceful protesters, particularly those advocating for pro-Palestinian rights and against genocide, have been met with an increasingly militarized police force that seems more intent on silencing dissent than protecting it. The contradiction could not be starker. While Germany publicly condemns authoritarian regimes abroad, its own institutions are employing methods that eerily echo the tactics of repression the nation once vowed to eradicate. The nature of the protests. Voices for Humanity. The recent protests sweeping through German cities have not been violent uprisings or riots. They have been gatherings of conscience, citizens demanding accountability from governments complicit in war crimes, and defending the sanctity of life against state-sponsored violence abroad. These movements, whether pro-Palestinian, anti-genocide, or pro-life, share a common thread: the moral conviction that silence in the face of injustice is complicity. Demonstrators have marched peacefully, chanting for peace, holding candles, waving flags, and reciting the names of victims lost to bombs and blockades. And yet, these voices, rather than being celebrated as the lifeblood of democracy, have been beaten, dragged, silenced. When peace meets violence. The Berlin assault. Perhaps no incident encapsulates this better than the attack on Kitty O'Brien, a 25-year-old Irish activist, during a pro-Palestinian rally in Berlin. Eyewitnesses describe how O'Brien, standing with a placard reading, "Stop the Genocide," was forcefully shoved, then punched by a police officer before being thrown to the ground. Photos and videos circulated widely on social media. Images of her bloodied and dazed, ignited outrage far beyond Germany's borders. Human rights organizations quickly condemned the act. Amnesty International released a blistering statement calling the violence unprovoked, unnecessary, and emblematic of a wider institutional rot within German law enforcement. The organization demanded a full, independent investigation, one that has yet to materialize. This was not an isolated event. Multiple reports across Germany recount similar scenes. Officers storming peaceful gatherings, confiscating flags, detaining journalists, and even arresting minors for merely holding signs deemed politically sensitive. The government's response: security or suppression. The German government's defense has been both swift and unsettling. Officials have repeatedly justified police actions as necessary to maintain public order, a phrase that has become a euphemism for silencing dissent. Interior Minister Nancy Faeser recently stated that Germany will not tolerate extremist gatherings, but critics argue that the label extremist is being applied so broadly that it now covers anyone daring to question Berlin's foreign policy or its unwavering military cooperation with Israel. Public opinion, meanwhile, remains divided. On one side are those who echo government talking points, viewing the protests as disruptive or even dangerous. On the other are the growing ranks of citizens, academics, and journalists who see in these crackdowns a dangerous drift toward authoritarianism. Germany has entered a moral gray zone, says Dr. Martin Keller, a Berlin-based sociologist. In its zeal to avoid being seen as anti-Semitic, the state is now criminalizing empathy itself. Echoes across Europe. A continent under pressure. What is happening in Germany does not exist in isolation. Across Europe, governments are tightening restrictions on demonstrations, particularly those criticizing Western allies or exposing hypocrisy in foreign policy. France has banned pro-Palestinian marches outright in several cities. The UK's new Public Order Act grants police sweeping powers to arrest individuals for potential disruptions. Germany, however, stands out because of its historical weight. For a nation that has long positioned itself as the guardian of memory and human rights, its current trajectory feels like a betrayal of its own post-war promise. If police can punch a peaceful protester in Berlin without consequence, what message does that send to Europe's young democracies, or to those fighting for democracy elsewhere? The moral cost of silence. At stake is not merely the right to protest but the moral credibility of an entire nation. Germany cannot continue to lecture the world about freedom and justice while suppressing those who dare to speak them aloud on its own soil. Each baton raised against a peaceful demonstrator chips away at the integrity of a democratic system that millions once looked to as a model of redemption. Every silenced chant, every confiscated flag, every unjust arrest echoes a haunting question. Has Germany truly learned from its past, or is it merely repeating it in subtler form? The fight for the right to speak. The suppression of protest in Germany is not only a domestic issue, it is a warning to all democracies. Civil liberties are not lost overnight. They are eroded piece by piece, each justified by the promise of order and security. It is the duty of citizens, journalists, activists, and ordinary people to resist that erosion. Freedom of expression is not a gift from the state. It is a right born from struggle and maintained through vigilance. Germany, and indeed all of Europe, must decide whether it still believes in the principles it claims to uphold, or whether it has traded them for the illusion of control. Because when a democracy begins to fear its own people, it is no longer a democracy at all.